This is a tutorial on how to make a Loki variant helmet. These are the materials you will need, and they can all be found on Amazon. These materials may likely be used again in later tutorials. The first step is to make a symmetrical base for the horns to be attached to. The easiest way to do this is to create your own stencil by first folding a sheet of paper in half, and then draw on the folded side of the helmet the base shape. Make sure the centre point, which will be in the middle of your forehead, is on the very edge of the fold. It may be helpful to plan out the key points and where there is a bend, and then keep on sketching until you are happy with the shape. Then whilst it is still folded, cut around the sketch. You can then unfold it and hold it up to your face to double check that you are happy with it before you start sculpting. The foam clay that you will be using will be fairly sticky, so lay down a sheet of cling film or baking paper. Then take a handful of foam and start to roll it out. There may be the occasional air bubble, however you can normally just pop it by rolling over it. Keep rolling until it's evenly about 1 centimetre thick. Then, to make sure that the paper stencil doesn't stick to the foam, fold over the cling film so that it's covering the entire surface. Now place the stencil on top and use a sharp object like a pencil or a cocktail pick to mark out into the clay the edges of the stencil. You may need to go over it a couple of times to be able to see the dent. When you are satisfied that it has left a clear enough outline, peel back the cling film and carefully cut it out using the scissors. The foam clay is quite bendy and sticky at this stage, so it's easier to roughly cut out the majority of the excess away and then later correct it to the right shape. Once you have done this, place this back onto the cling film and then place the stencil back on top and slightly mark out the shape again to make sure that it's still accurate and symmetrical. Keep making adjustments until you're happy. To now start the detailing, roll out the foam until it's about 1 centimetre, then mark out the outline of the inner part of the helmet. Then leaving 1 centimetre width at the point of the forehead, draw parallel to the marking you just made. Make sure it gradually comes to a point to where the cheekbones will be. Then cut this out. Make sure it wasn't bent out of its shape too much whilst you were cutting it. Keep reusing the excess clay cutouts by squishing it all back together and rolling it out again. Place this detailing onto the helmet and secure it in place by pressing it down. You can smoothen out any bumps by folding the cling film over the clay and rolling and dragging the cocktail stick on its side. Keep neatening it up, and when you're happy, repeat it on the other side. For the next part of the detailing, roll out a section of clay which is about 2 cm thick. Then mark out the shape similar to an open book or a bent rectangle. The angle at which it's bent should match the bend at the centre part of the headpiece. Once you've cut it out, start to bend it slightly and smoothen out the edges. Roll out a piece of foam that's under the width of 1 centimetre. Mark out 2 sharp horn-like points. When it comes to detailing, it may be helpful to search up President Loki horns for a reference photo. Because this foam is quite bendy, I would recommend cutting these horns out separately. This way they are easier to add onto the helmet. Before adding this detailing, use the stencil waste paper to place under the helmet so that it's got a curve to its surface. This is so that when it's dry and you're wearing it against your head, it curves naturally and doesn't tear. Start to add on the detailing by placing it onto the right place and securing it down with the point of the cocktail stick. You can also add some vertical lines onto the rectangle shape here to add some more texture. Add the 2 other pieces onto the centre, making sure the points overlap on the centre slightly. When you are ready, start to sculpt the horns. Roll a handful of foam in between your hands, making sure that one end is fairly thick and the other is coming to a fine point. Add a slight curve to the horn so that it flicks upwards. Repeat this again to create the other horn, and make sure they are somewhat even. Make 2 indents in the helmet, marking out where the horns will be attached. Place the horn directly on the dot and press down somewhat firmly, but without ruining the shape of the horn. Use the cocktail pick again to smudge it down into the main base of the helmet, and then repeat this again on the other horn. For the final details, roll out a thin piece of foam and mark out 2 strips. Cut these out and then wrap them around each horn. You can remove any excess foam. Pat it down and smooth it out, and then repeat this on the other horn. Pierce 2 holes at the edge of the helmet for where you will thread the elastic through. To set it up to dry, add paper underneath the main centre of the helmet, where the curve of your head will be. and under each of the horns. This will stop it from losing its shape whilst it dries overnight. It can take maximum up to 24 hours to dry. To start the painting process, take your gold metallic paint and paint a base colour all over the horns. Make sure you paint into each crease as well. You may have to do a couple of coats of paint for it to be one full coverage. Then, once it's completely covered, add a small amount of black paint to the gold to create a darker tone to add shadows and depth to the horns. This will help them look more three-dimensional and realistic. You can add contours and marks where there would be dent in the metal. You can add this aging effect to the metal by lightly brushing over any ridges on the foam. This will pick up the paint but leave gaps where there is some mark makings. Just keep experimenting with the paint and the shadows until you're happy. Leave this to dry for about half an hour. Then, using up the remaining paint, paint the back of the helmet. This part is somewhat optional, however I think it helps tie everything together and finishes it off nicely whilst reducing waste. Once the horns are completely dry, attach a piece of elastic which, when stretched, goes around your entire head. Poke it through the hole you made and do a double knot securing it in place. Trim off the small excess amount of elastic. Then knot the other end through the other hole. To finish it off and make sure you don't really see the elastic, paint over the showing parts with a small amount of gold paint. Leave it to dry and then you can try it on. This is how mine turns out in the end, and thank you for watching.